Are we all part of some huge hi-fi conspiracy and not realize it? Speaker size. Speakers used to be huge.
These big 3-way 12-inch speaker systems.
Now they're small. I feel like a frog that's been in some warm water and it's been turned up 1 degree at a time, and now I'm boiling and I'm dying. They did it so slowly. So which one's right for you? The big ones or the small ones? And which one is better? Because you're gonna be surprised. Put on your weight belt.
There's no heavy lifting.
Pick up a giant tower speaker because this is gonna get interesting.
Fancy a subwoofer, do you?
Ah, the 50s, when doctors recommended Camel cigarettes. I'm sorry, that joke, I did that joke in a previous video, but I think it's hilarious. So I'm doing it again. Back in the 50s, if you wanted a nice hi-fi setup, well, you didn't have a lot of choices. You were getting a speaker the size of a furniture, giant end table, or console stereo. And they weren't cheap. Klipsch horns were around then. Huge. However, in 1954, Edgar Vilcher, well, he changed everything. He invented acoustic suspension, which is a sealed enclosure, and it delivered real bass from a small size. Suddenly, you didn't need a refrigerator-sized speaker to get decent bass. But not to be outdone, somewhere across the pond, a British guy said, "Hold my pint." It was the 70s, and the BBC invented a speaker called the LS3/5A. Anyway, they used them in mobile broadcast vans, so they obviously couldn't have Klipsch horns in there, even if they wanted them, but they used them to monitor audio, voices specifically. So, well, they are good at voices specifically. And in some people's opinion, they sounded fantastic, because they sold over 60,000 units, and everybody's knocking off the LS5A now, including other people. Meanwhile, I love saying meanwhile, in the US, Advent, EPI, and KLH were pushing affordable, space-saving speakers. And it made sense. A lot of people lived in small apartments. They deserved hi-fi too. There was also economic pressure. Not everybody had a whole bunch of extra money. Is that when the gas lines were?
Gas lines at many stations were a lot longer than normal.
I really think it's terrible.
There's no shortage. I don't believe there's a shortage.
Yes, end of the 70s. Because my Dodge Aspen RT is neutered. Had the clean burn system on a 360 V8 engine that made 120 horsepower or something like that.
Wow.
Anyway, I digress. And now, little speakers weren't just a novelty. They were hitting the mainstream. Guess what happened in the 1980s?
Here's the Radio Shack speaker sale you've been waiting for.
Mass production was happening. Guess what also happened at the end in 1978? The realistic minimus was introduced. And I have a pair of those. I had a pair of those growing up too, used of course. People put those things in Porsches and cars. Bookshelf speakers got more affordable than ever, and in 1982, Wharfedale introduced the Diamond. It was only 5 liters in size. Anyway, they made a big impact with a small woofer. And even college kids could afford decent small speakers. And you thought these speakers were small? Well, wait till we talk about what's next, because these things were the size of an...
Surround sound, HD TV compatible.
What is this, Bose? 5.1 Dolby.
Surround sound became all the rage, and who wants 5 giant tower speakers in their living room? No one's got time for that. And oh yeah, Bose introduced Acoustics. I think they did that in the late 80s. Acoustics. Tiny little speakers. I actually had a set of those. Got them from the Navy PX. They came with a hidden bass module, which is a subwoofer.
Oh, bodacious subwoofers, yo!
But it actually didn't go down very low. Bose. No highs, no lows. Must be Bose. And the WAF factor? Off the charts. You couldn't walk into Circuit City or Best Buy and not see the Bose demo right up front. And when they were smaller than a cup of coffee, well, if you wanted new speakers, you're probably getting the Bose.
Meanwhile,
Tower speakers had to go on Ozempic to stay relevant. They got smaller. And suddenly, it wasn't about high fidelity anymore. It was about trying to make the glass of your coffee shake when Jurassic Park came up.
Smaller, always smaller.
Obviously, tower speakers still exist, and we'll get to why later. However, bookshelf speakers kept getting better and better. They were tiny, but they still slapped you in the face like a longshoreman that you interrupted his lunch.
Very!
And technology got way better. Beefier, better drivers. Small ones that could handle big bass. Ported speakers. And this time, instead of just drilling a hole in the back of the speaker, there was science involved. And those tower speakers, at least the affordable ones, kept getting smaller and smaller, like they were on Ozempic. I know I already said that joke, but I thought it was really clever, so I'm going to say it again. And if you think about big old ADS looked like back in the day, and what tower speakers, even the bigger tower speakers look like from Klipsch or ELAC, a lot different. But why, Randy? Well, I'm glad you asked.
Stereo outfit for the tweeter and two woofers.
Technology, science. Small speakers got better, but also flat screens and home theater. And instead of the focus being on the hi-fi system, the focus was now on how big your TV was. So the public hath spoken, and well, the speaker companies, well, they had to adapt. Another interesting thing was that amplifiers were getting more and more powerful. Back in the day, you had a 50-watt amplifier, you had a powerhouse. Now 50 watts was nothing. But if you have more power, well, then you can drive smaller speakers. And I know it sounds counterintuitive if you're new to the hobby, but a big speaker generally is more efficient, which means it plays louder at the same power than a small speaker. And driver technology got better. A 5-inch woofer could now move the same amount of air that an 8-inch woofer could. And because subwoofers were now somewhat mainstream because of Bose, well, the flex wasn't about your tower speakers anymore. It was about how big your subwoofer was. But here's the twist. It wasn't just about convenience. It wasn't about apartment size. And it wasn't even about watching the third re-release of the Star Wars trilogy.
Really? Star Wars?
It was about something else. And once again, we gotta go across the pond.
You anything smaller?
Money. Of course it was about money. Manufacturing shifted overseas. In the late 80s and 90s, stuff was being made in China, Taiwan, or Malaysia. And guess what? It took a while to get from China, Taiwan, or Malaysia back to the US. Polk Audio, Infinity, Boston Acoustics, JBL. One by one, they shut down US manufacturing plants. And by the early 2000s, everybody was manufacturing overseas, including Kef, Wharfdale, even Bowers & Wilkins. Shipping from China wasn't cheap. Also, retailers. More speakers, same amount of real estate, means everybody can walk out of Best Buy unless they got trampled trying to get a Cabbage Patch Kid previously during the day. So even if the companies didn't love it to begin with, well, they started to love it now because it was time to increase that margin. Now, it wasn't just about money. The speakers actually got a lot better. Manufacturers were making way more of them. They were figuring out port length. They were figuring out driver technology. You had new, stiffer, lighter materials like aluminum, Kevlar, woven cone fiber woofers. Crossovers improved. Things got cheaper. And with mass production, quality was consistent. So you had a shift starting all the way in the 50s. You had home theater hitting it. You had overseas manufacturing. You had retailers that loved the small speakers. It was a perfect storm for the death of the giant tower speaker. Q Acoustics, one of my favorite brands, was created in 2006. Armor Home is the company that owns them, and they saw a gap in the market, and that gap was affordable, high-quality bookshelf speakers, but also tower speakers. They started with the 1000 series, and then you guessed it, 2000, and 3000 series. And now we're at the 3000C series. And I've listened to all of them, old and new. They've had the same designer, Kieran Dunk, since day one. And they do have this kind of clean aesthetic, European aesthetic. They're real pretty and modern. And they really leaned into eliminating as much cabinet resonance as they could. They had point-to-point bracing, even like this gel inner Oreo style of a sandwiched enclosure. But it wasn't delicious Oreo filling. It was some type of hi-fi gel.
Yummy.
And, well, now the 3000C series has a bunch of trickle-down technology from the 5000 series, which had trickle-down technology from the Concept series. They started budget, but they've gone up market too. And today we're going to look at something kind of interesting. Their mid-tier 5000 series bookshelf speaker versus their affordable line, the new 3050C tower speaker. Now, if you want to skip over this section, I have everything time-stamped so you can just skip to the end of the tower versus bookshelf speaker debate. Conspiracy, propaganda, I'm just kidding. But I would stick around because these are really good speakers. 5020, a bookshelf speaker with a 5-inch woofer and a 1-inch tweeter. The 3050C, it's a tower speaker with two 5.5-inch woofers and one 1-inch tweeter. 5020 goes down to 53 hertz on the bottom. 3050C goes down to 42 hertz on the bottom. The 5020s are $900 a pair. The 3050Cs come in at a retail of $1,200 a pair, and they're sold as singles. So if you buy them, buy two. Unless you love listening in mono. So for $300, well, you get a tower speaker that plays deeper. However, if you've watched the channel at all, you know I'm a big fan of bookshelf speakers paired up with a good sub. Because then you have a bunch of options. You can put the sub wherever you want, you can dial in levels, and there's more freedom to move around the bookshelves. But is there? Because by the time you put them on a stand, they're taking up about the same amount of floor space as a tower speaker would be taking up. Except you can't put a tower speaker on a media console. Well, you can, but it's going to look funny. The other thing is a tower speaker, you get what you get when it comes to bass. But with the 3050Cs, you are getting more output. You're also getting a much more efficient speaker. And again, efficiency is how loud a speaker plays at a given power rating. So the 5020s are 87.9 dB sensitive. The 3050Cs are 90 dB sensitive. And that 2 or 3 dB, well, it's more than you think it is. You also get more scale. Now, I don't listen at super loud volumes, so I love the 5020s because they live between 70 about 85 dB when it comes to how loud things are. But the 3050Cs will drop a hammer on your big toe and then you'll trip over a cinder block. It'll be a bad day because the 3050Cs are punching you in the face. But 3050Cs are 40 pounds. But if you're young and healthy, and haven't had a hernia surgery, we can probably move them around. So I'm kind of on team bookshelves and sub. The problem is I'm kind of falling in love with the 3050Cs. Okay, let's just cut to the chase. The 3050Cs sound an awful like the 5040s, which is more expensive than the 3050Cs. Marginal improvement in clarity. I love the 5000 series. I love Q Acoustics, but the 5000 series was the first. It was the first speaker family that really clicked with me because I felt like the previous generations, the 3000i, the 3020s, all that stuff, I thought they were a little bit too neutral for me, not as dynamic. And man, oh man, the 5000 series has this organic, yummy, believable, but more importantly, dynamic sound. It gives you all the top-end clarity you need, but it's also kind of laid back. But it doesn't seem laid back when you listen to it. So anything's going to sound pretty good on the 5000 series. Even poorly recorded music that I love to listen to. You're kind of splitting hairs. Now, the 5050s have a bit of a different sound. I actually enjoy the sound of the 5040s better than the 5050s. But the 3050Cs, are you confused yet? I know I am. I was told there would be no math. The 3050Cs actually remind me of the 5040s. And they're $300 cheaper than the 5040s. And what can you get with $300? Well, a subwoofer, or a new DAC, or a new CD player, or a new turntable, or a new streamer. You can get a lot of stuff for $300. If Q Acoustics had a problem, it's Q Acoustics and the 3050C. And here's the funny thing. My wife doesn't love big speakers, but she likes these speakers because they're curvy and not brutal, sharp-edged monstrosities. They're also not picky about amps at all. I've had everything powering it. The Weem Vibe Link amp, the Weem Amp Ultra, the Emotiva TA2, the Iota VX stuff that I've had in, the Cambridge Audio Evo 150, the RuArc R610, all have powered the Q Acoustics 3050Cs. And they're kind of the same, except, I mean, the Evo 150 did sound quite a bit different. But these speakers are putting their own flavor onto the music, and that flavor is yummy. Some speakers that I've listened to absolutely take on the sound of the amp. You may like that, but if you don't have a great amp, then, well, you want the speakers to kind of cover up a little bit of sins. They remind me of the Sonus Faber Lumina 2 Amateurs, but bigger and louder, dare I say, better. And cheaper. Bottom line, it's kind of the Goldilocks of tower speakers. Not too big, not too small, not too bright, not too flat, just right. This is a giant leap from the previous 3000 series, and half a stumble away from the 5000 series. Everything from TV, and last night I watched K-pop Demon Hunters with my daughter on Netflix. It was actually really good. Fun little animated movie. It's about demon hunters that are pop stars. Money for Nothing is a fun song to test the speaker's dynamics. And you know that song. Everybody knows that song. But it just builds and builds and builds. And it fakes you into turning things up. And these things were, I think these things hit 97 dB peak. Chris Cornell, his cover of Patience, that's a little grainy, the way that it was recorded. That track doesn't sound so good on some speakers. But the 3050C is laid back just enough to take those sharp edges off. And Chris Cornell never sounded better. So, which speaker is right for you? A tower speaker or a bookshelf speaker? I don't think it takes a rocket scientist to figure out that tower speakers, floor standing speakers aren't as popular. They aren't as ubiquitous. I'm not saying they're not as popular. For most people, though, that are just getting into hi-fi, they're generally not running out and buying a floor-standing speaker. And the real irony is that even the floor-standing speakers that exist today, well, they don't go down that much lower than a good bookshelf. So, if you want to hear the pipe organ, you're still going to have to buy a subwoofer unless it's a full-range speaker, and hardly anybody makes affordable full-range speakers anymore.
Meanwhile,
it's still about money. And the weird thing was, when I first started the channel and I was going through bookshelves like crazy, I would have to weigh myself and then hold the speaker and weigh myself and the speaker. And almost invariably, they were all 39 pounds. So there was some type of shipping cost cutoff at 40 pounds. Because these speakers boxed up, it's statistical improbability that so many of them would weigh 39 pounds. So there's obviously a financial component to all this.
one more thing.
Oh, I also forgot to mention mastering studios. They're all using small speakers, those white Yamahas. So a lot of stuff today, especially popular music, is being mastered on small speakers. Because if it sounds good on a small speaker, it's probably going to sound good on a big speaker too. The good news is that even though speakers went from the size of a refrigerator to the size of a lunchbox, they all sound good, most of them. If you're after that really visceral experience, there's no replacement for displacement. Unless you have a 1979 Dodge Aspen RT with a 360 cubic inch engine that puts out 175 horsepower. And if you get a good pair of bookshelf speakers and a sub, it's tough to beat. When you hear a floor standing speaker like the 3050C or the 5040s. I don't know what it is. I mean, I don't like to fuss around with it. I'm such a lazy audiophile. I don't like to futz around with a subwoofer. It's just easy because every time I change speakers, I've got to redial in the subwoofer. It's a whole deal. And it's just nice to throw up a pair of floor standing speakers that sound awesome and be done with it, even if they do need a sub. But the music I listen to, I never felt like I needed a sub. The other thing about, if you're my age, a little bit older, tower speakers were the thing. I had a buddy. He had Sherwin Vegas. I had Realistic Minimus. And guess whose speaker we listened to? Well, granted, his speaker sounded way better than my Minimus did. It wasn't necessarily about the sound. It was about the aspiration to have a large speaker. And I think subconsciously, that's still in a lot of us. We just think bigger is better. Is it? Well, it depends on you, depends on your room, depends on your budget. But the good news is, you could spend $1,500 on a pair of Sonus Faber Lumina 2 Amateurs, $900 on a pair of Q Acoustics 5020, or $1,200 on a pair of Q Acoustics 3050Cs. And I hate to say it, but I'm choosing the 3050Cs.